Okay, it's 20 past the hour. We have a pretty full agenda, so I propose that we get started. So my name is Thomas Ortele. Together with Pascal Toubert, we're co-chairing the 6TISCH working group. Welcome to the 6TISCH working group meeting here at Yokohama. Before we get started, I need to remind everybody of the Note Well. The Note Well applies to this meeting as it applies to any IETF meeting. If you're aware of any IPR, you have to disclose it, whether it's yours or not. Take a look at the slide. Take a look at the documents that are referenced in here. If you have any questions, ask an AD or a work group chair. We'd be happy to answer your questions. So as a reminder, we're taking minutes. Thank you very much, Dominique, for taking the minutes. We're taking the minutes on the Etherpad. That's on the first slide. The slides are uploaded on the meeting materials. You're welcome to download them and join Dominique in taking minutes if needed. The meeting is recorded, recording is posted, and the presence is logged. And Pascal, I think you have the blue sheets sitting here. Blue sheets are in the room. Please sign them anytime during this meeting. Dominique has agreed to be a scribe. Please join him. And then I'm looking for a Jabber scribe. Can somebody volunteer to do a Jabber scribe to join the 6TISCH meeting room? Thank you. And then this is the agenda that we have prepared. We have a 2-hour slot. It will be fast, so let's be efficient. The first item is an introduction to status, which I'm doing now. We then will talk about the charter, the new charter with the status on the documents, the text about the new charter, the milestones that are associated with it, and an action plan for the next couple of months between now and the next meeting. We then enter the technical core with dynamic scheduling. We have Xavi Villajuzana who will present the 6-stop sublayer update, which includes the 6-stop protocol, and then a companion document called SF0 for scheduling function 0, which Margarita Palatella will present. We then move on to a section on tracks in 6TISCH with Pascal presenting a draft for DetNet. And then we'll finish by a couple of any other business points. One of the points being the announcement of the second 6TISCH plug test by Miguel Angel. And then we'll have as well, I think, a slide by Charlie on some activity at the IEEE. Before we move on, is there any changes we want to make to this agenda? Please raise the issue now. So with my work group chair off, I'd like to raise something. So we have had very good feedback, very constructive feedback on the minimal draft, and part of that feedback requires the work group to discuss something. So I'd like to, after the charter discussion, I'd like to take a couple of minutes to ask a couple of questions to the working group before we proceed with dynamic scheduling. So between charter and dynamic scheduling, I propose that we take a couple of minutes for feedback that was provided on the minimal draft. Any other changes? Okay, let's write down in the minutes that the agenda is approved, and let's follow this agenda then. The first item is the recharting discussion, status of the work group, so I'll leave the floor to Pascal.
Thank you very much. So we've been actually discussing the recharter for more than one IETF. So we added that a number of interim calls. We discussed it at the last IETF as well. So as it goes, the first generation of our charter indicated that we would limit the scope, and that's what we did with minimal draft, to a static schedule. So the big change, the big novelty in the new work that we are proposing to take on in this group is actually to work on a schedule that can be modified dynamically. And that means a capability to negotiate between devices at the layer 2 outside to add or remove some cells in the link, which is used for IP. So is it relevant to recharter at this time, considering our milestones? So here is basically a summary of the last of the milestones that we have. We realized that the 6TISCH architecture was not delivered in time, and there is a reason for that. We had a review. We went to we asked for an internet area review, and you know that last time we discussed that we would actually postpone the architecture till we've got all the items figured out. We had in mind to ship it in 3 volumes, and the feedback was, don't do that. Wait till you're done and make it a single volume. So the single volume will incorporate what we already have, which is the basic idea of what we do, the static schedule, then the second round, which is mostly the dynamic scheduling, and then the third round, which is the .NET kind of application for 6TISCH. So the architecture will not be delivered. It will progress, but at the moment it has to be reshaped a bit, but mostly we need new content, and that new content will come from the work on the dynamic schedule. So that's why actually this is postponed, and the terminology is kind of coming with it, so it's postponed as well. We have moved the CoAP data model and the information model for the 6-stop interface. And we have moved them because we have dependencies on COMI, which we think will be the way we will transport this. So we have effectively an information model for which we would like anytime to get more feedback from implementations. But ultimately, we can't implement this thing till we have COMI finally figured out. So Peter, I've been waiting on you, and we don't want to hold the work in this working group till you're done. We don't want to put too much pressure on you. So we want to put that on hold, hopefully get more feedback on the information model, and start working on the dynamic schedule. So that's really why we are now looking at dynamic scheduling. So if we look at the previous charter, what is in red will be going for the time being. We'll keep what's in black up there because we continue working on the architecture. The information model, we have it, but we don't want to ship it yet. And the minimal configuration, well, Thomas will talk at length about the review that we got, but we got excellent reviews on this one. And so it's moving forward towards the ASG reviews. So the new charter would have 3 major new work items. So one, as I said, would be the dynamic scheduling. So that's the 6-stop sublayer and the scheduling function. And we propose to have one default scheduling function. It's a bit like an objective function in REPL. It's a piece of logic that you can place above 6-stop, and that will make intelligent decisions about the allocations of time slots by the 6-stop sublayer. And so that's the first big item for the new charter. There is an intense activity on security. It's been there since we started 6TISCH. Initially, we were not chartered for that, but considering the activity and the results that are occurring on the mailing list, we would like to charter for the piece, which is really the bootstrap of the network for a 6TISCH network. And last but not least, we want to prepare for the third round of our work, which is how we can use the .NET methods to program forwarding inside the 6TISCH network. We are not ready for that. We will probably, hopefully, reuse models that are defined by .NET and augment the information models as we need. But for the time being, what we really want to do is explain correctly what we want to achieve at 6TISCH to .NET, so that .NET can include that in their third process. And for that, we need to have a document that this group agrees upon on what exactly it is we want to achieve. So that's why we have this work item in the charter. So the new text, as it stands now, as it's being proposed now, is like this. So you see the red is replaced by what is blue. So this has been discussed at probably 2 interims already. There is one little bone of contention here that we have to better define. It is this for IP traffic. So I'll come back to that in the next slide. But for the rest, what you see here is, okay, now the 6-step sublayer, we are defining the mechanism to use it. That's basically the SF0 work. So, well, it's here actually. This is what we used to call, well, that's a 6-step sublayer. How does it work? How does it negotiate with the peer on the next devices? This is the SF0 work. And this is the secure bootstrapping that I just discussed. And this is the .NET requirement. Okay, that's the text which goes with what I just said. So then again, we won't review this text in detail today. We don't have much time, but if you have any knee-jerk reaction, then please come to the mic. Otherwise, please come on the mailing list. We'll be working on the mailing list again on this. So the bone of contention was this for IP traffic. So initially, this really meant that we care to work on the IP and the layer 3 interface to 6-step. That is when we use 6-step from a router to another router, as opposed to forwarding at layer 2.5 from a cell to a cell in a GMPLS fashion. And we got commands that people would already start to work on this applied inside what we call a track. And then, well, there is this reaction that we have not defined a track, so how could we propose a spec which says how it works? So I'm willing to be open on that, and if there is a contribution that explain how they see a track operating for dynamic scheduling, well, let's see the work. But I don't want this group to be slowed down in the link layer abstraction that we'll be providing for IP packet by any work that would be talking about tracks, which is really the 3rd iteration of our charter. So let's see what work there is, but really what we care first is to make sure we do the dynamic scheduling for the IP traffic that goes all the way to the router and down. If this logic, if this work works for what we call soft tracks, which are defined by some future protocol like RSVP or .NET, well, so be it, that's fine. As long as it's IP traffic, I'm pretty sure it's going to work because we can signal things in IP that we'll be able to use. For non-IP traffic, like there is a tunnel mode in our track forwarding, well, I'm not sure we'll have on the indication all the information in the packet to do whatever we want. So I don't want to take any commitment at all about how that would work. We have to define that in the 3rd round of our work. And then we have this non-milestone work item. You've seen the way we have been operating for the last 2 IETFs. We have started this kind of agile, or 3 IETFs actually. We have started this kind of agile process whereby we provide something in the spec, and at the next IETF or in an interim between, we actually test what we just said. So we believe in running code more than ever. We actually believe in interrupt test for our running code. So this is what this non-work group item means. It really means that we care a lot about the plug test. And we want to make more of them, and we'll be discussing that at the end of this meeting, the next plug test and what the content. But really, the way we want to do that, we want to be agile. We want to provide this little snippet of specification, test it, incorporate it, new snippet, test it, incorporate it. The next snippet that we'll care about will be the 6-step interface, okay? Because that's the building block on which we'll be able to build the dynamic scheduling, SF0, etc. So the action plan is this: be agile, be agile. And I see Brian is coming.
Brian Haberman, 2 questions. The ordered list that you had up there, is that the order you would expect to get the work done? That one.
Here?
Yep.
There is, some of this is actually completely parallelized. This work is well advanced already. At least the initial work that needs to be reviewed and worked on by the group is well advanced. This is much less advanced.
Hold on, Pascal. Let me jump to the punchline of the question. Will I see the 6-TISCH architecture first?
Okay, so no, the 6-TISCH architecture well, our decision as a group last time, we can revise it, was this will be coming, we'll work on it, but we won't produce a document at the end of this charter. We'll have moved forward with this architecture document. What we said last time is we only ship the architecture when we're done, which means at the end of the 3rd iteration of the schedule, which is our current plan, after we do the tracks forwarding.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure everybody understands that, right? Okay.
And not only understand, but agrees, right?
Were you going to add something, Thomas? Were you just...
I was going to answer no. That it's not in order of which we want to deliver. And so are you recommending that we reorder things, or is it just something you want to make clear?
Because I know several ADs who will look at a numbered list and go, oh, that's the order I'm going to see them in. I would just make it an unordered list and maybe say, you may actually want to state in the charter that the architecture document is an evolving document based on work, so that they don't think that they're going to see that first, because a lot of people will expect to see that first.
So we remove the numbers, we place bullets, we change this wording here, say we work on it, but we don't deliver it.
Yeah, thank you. Let's write in the minutes, and I see that it's written as an action item for us to do this. Thank you.
Okay, and then my second question, go forward a couple of slides.
This way or the other way? Back and forth.
This one. No, this one. So the wording here is a little troublesome to me, in that if you have to write a separate document that clarifies how running code is supposed to work, I am going to scream bloody murder, because that's basically writing a spec to fix a spec.
So yeah, so it's the wording that's.
I'm sure it is. I just want to make sure everybody understood. I'm looking at going.
Yeah. So we're talking about the test description here, the list of tests that we go through in an interop.
And that gets me to question number 3.
Yeah.
So if I were to put on my, let's pretend I'm a IETF process weenie, this sounds like a compliance statement.
It really aims to say we'll be producing test specification, not for compliance, but for people to make sure they implement things that the same things, so that we can test them against one another.
So can I envision that something that meets the will be used for running interoperability events is really just this is what we think should be done in order to test the compatibility of 2 implementations? Or are you saying an implementation must do A, B, and C, and should do D, E, and F? Because that sounds like a node requirements document. I'm trying to tease out what's going to be in this piece of work.
So this text actually reflects what we did at the first 6-TISCH plug test. We produced a document which said, here are 18 tests that we go through, and by the way, for those tests, this is the key we're going to use, just for the test, for the interoperability test.
Yes, it's a requirement for playing that game that day. It's not a requirement for being a 6-TISCH node. It's basically, people must implement the same thing so that we can test one against the other. For instance, if there are 3 security mechanisms, we want to make one mandatory, so we are sure that we can connect to everybody, and then the others are nice to have, so we actually describe that. And once you've passed security, then you can start doing repo, etc. So that's kind of this chain of dependency, and we express it. So the implementation know that what they did, they present that, they work with somebody else in front of them and say, oh, with what you have implemented out of the spec, with what I have implemented, here is what we can do. If we did not give any directions, then they could be doing nothing in common, and we could have nothing to test. So all we're trying to say here is give a list of things that we expect everybody to provide, so we have a baseline for testing one against the other.
Do you have any intent of actually pushing these documents forward for publication as RFCs?
No.
Thank you.
Michael Richardson, one thought I have though is that the document, absent the answers, having only the questions, might be an interesting document that you might call important issues when you're deploying, right? Because it would say a bunch of things that you better get right or have tweakable, and that would be useful. And coming from IPsec space, there's a lot of people that just didn't expose the knobs to end users that they had in plugfests because they didn't think it was important. And then end users were like, but you said it interoperated, and it says I need to set the blue knob to 4, and I don't have a blue knob.
Pascal will buy you a blue knob. But actually that sounds a little bit different though, right? That's a deployment and operational considerations document.
Right, and it asks questions which during the plugfest you have to have answers for.
But in my mind, what you just described,
it's not decided.
is not reflected
Not what they
there.
said, I know,
Right.
but I'm just saying that's a tweak that would change it slightly, get what we want for the plugfest, and leave some evidence behind as to what's important for this.
Right.
Okay.
And that's something that's worth publishing.
Yeah.
Absolutely worth publishing. So
Okay, so we would derive a best
Did you
practice.
call it, say the words again, operational?
I said an operational or deployment considerations document.
Somebody write that down. Make sure. Operational consideration document. Well, that's what I heard.
I can go and stick it in the Jabber room if it helps.
Okay, so that's a new proposal. We can have charter word on this. Chonggang.
Chonggang Wang, Pascal, can you go back to the slide for the charter slide? For the bullet 3, I saw there is concept IoT routers. So I was wondering what's the definition of IoT router? I couldn't find this concept in 6TISCH architecture.
That's true. So we should say
the bullet number 3, the IoT router. So I don't know what's the definition about
actually,
IoT router.
I think it's already removed in the text, so it's just that this text doesn't seem to be the utmost latest. So I think this one was actually erased. So I'll check, but I think the IoT is gone.
Yeah, because if we use a 6-LoWPAN router, 6LR, I think that's understood for everyone.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I think the IoT is already gone, so we'll check online, but it will go if it's not done, gone yet.
My second question is still about the bullet number 3. You underline the full IP traffic. I think it's fine if we discuss over the mailing list, but still the last sentence for that bullet also relate to the IP traffic.
Yes, because for non-IP traffic, we can't use the taggings that we are defining for IP. So there are some operations that we define that we don't know how to do. And as long as we have not defined what we do for non-IP traffic, we can't do a spec which does something on it. So first we have to work on tracks, define them, and then we can work on how you do dynamic scheduling for them. There is an order of things. It's not that we will never work on it. It's that for this charter, we want to be able to rely on the fact it's an IP packet, it's an IP address. It has some tags that we put in the IP packet for Ripple, for instance. We are using not the flow label anymore, but the RPI in the packet to identify the flow. If we don't have the RPI in the IP packet, we don't know what flow that is. We can't associate requirements for it, like increase the bandwidth, decrease the bandwidth, realize that this packet is a retry of that packet. We can't do any of that unless we define something else in the future which will enable to tag the packet differently. We don't have any of that, so we can't commit to do work on OTF on something that we don't understand. Once we understand the thing, then we see if the work extends to that or if we need to do something else. It's not that we don't want to work on it, and if you want to produce some early specifications, be welcome. We have been doing OTF since the group started, but we can't. This is different. This is a commitment that this group makes to the ISG that we will deliver a specification, right? So we put a limit on what we say we will deliver, but you can still work on the rest, right? Produce. documents.
I'm not sure if I'm fully convinced, because the reason I was asking that is, if we look at the 6TISCH architecture document,
Yes, the
section 8.1.1.
Yes, talks
There is-
about that.
yeah.
Doesn't mean that we'll implement it in this round. The 6TISCH architecture are our vision for the 3 rounds. It talks about dynamic scheduling. It talks about a lot of things. Doesn't mean that we charter for everything that's in it. Example, everything that's in it was there for the first charter. We didn't produce specs for everything, right? So the architecture gives you a view of everything we want to do. It doesn't say we'll do it in the first charter or in the second charter or in the third charter. Right? It's not because it's in the architecture that it will end in this charter. That's different. The architecture says what we see, but doesn't have all the details that we need to make those tracks work. We need additional work. Otherwise, this group would be done.
But anyway, I think the description here is not consistent with the architecture. If we can have a further discussion over the main list, I think
Yes,
that would
mailing
be
list
helpful.
would be good.
Yeah.
We can't stay there.
Yeah,
But
thanks.
the charter is a commitment to the ISG, right? So what we say here, we deliver.
Subir, quick question. The number 2, do you have a good understanding that what work will be done in IEEE and what will be done here?
No.
I think it's a little bit vague, right, at this point. Or
So we have a dependency on this work to do everything else. So
Okay.
our goal is to do the work here,
okay,
and then work with IEEE about transitioning. But we'll produce an RFC. This charter item says we'll produce an RFC about 6-stop. And this RFC will be compatible with the specs as we know them from IEEE, which do not have anything comparable to 6-stop. So we'll have solutions which will deploy with the 6-stop RFC plus 15.4 to 2015. Okay, so what happens with 2018, not 15.4, is completely another story.
Okay.
And that day, maybe 6-stop will be in IEEE specs. But
Yes,
for the time being,
so-
we need this thing here, and we need it now. So
okay.
we're
So
working on it.
now I understand, but I think if we say that the protocol and associated packet formats, right, could be continued at the IEEE, I think putting some additional clarifications with that which protocol and packet formats are we talking about, right? Because the last sentence say the work on the protocol and associated packet formats could be continued at the IEEE, right?
That's the 6-stop sublayer.
Yeah, so I think some additional clarifications could be helpful, because
Okay.
one may mean that, okay, whatever is done, that protocol formats and packet formats can be also done in IEEE. I think it's fine, because with our relationship, we can do that work, but which would be here, but what explanation you gave that, okay, fine, as IEEE evolves, right, these things also needs to be evolved. If that is the understanding, then it makes sense, right?
Yeah, I want to make it as open as we can because we don't know yet.
Right.
So, if again, it's a commitment. So
Okay. No,
if you have suggestion, please come to the list because we won't spend.
I think that
we have a long
just
meeting.
to add some clarifications would be.
So as a clarification for, this is Thomas, as a clarification for the working group, we had a meeting, a liaison meeting, IEEE IETF, where we're going to talk about this, and Charlie will introduce the work that has been going on at the IEEE.
So let's continue on the mailing list, please, because that's an important thing.
Okay, this is Amita Chakrabarti. I assume that the 6TISCH architecture will be some of the items that you will be considering will be run on top of 6LoWPAN stack.
Everything we know today is run on top of 6LoWPAN.
Okay, so there might be something that is running only concerning on 6-stop, but I'm thinking like the architecture.
That's the
that
famous
is
for IP that you saw earlier.
Okay, so in those cases, I think they would be also applicable. They might be applicable to 6LoW in general. If it is, we would like to have the reviews done too. So I appreciate that if you guys work with 6LoW working group to have the reviews done in both working groups.
Yes, I understand, and I'm positive with that. It really depends on which specification. For instance, the 6-stop work that you're talking about is really specific to TSCH. Now, some other things we do above it that do not really depend on the PHY, and probably not so much on the Mac. Okay, so it's a case by case, I guess.
Yes,
Just now I
case
don't
by
have an
case
example to
menu.
say, yes, it's exactly what we want to do there. But let's continue working together and
Sure.
we'll figure out when this case happens. Hopefully, my personal hope, and that's me without a hat, a lot of this work will work on many different files.
So we have to, we're a little bit late.
Yes, we are done. I think that was it. So next item being.
Yeah, so this is the item on polling the working group about the reviews that we received for the minimal draft. You have the clicker. So the minimal draft was pushed to IHD, and we have received very constructive feedback from two INT directorate members and from the INT AD. To progress the work, I sent a very long email yesterday where I summarized all these different points and provide some proposed action items for the editor, action items for ourselves, the chairs, some questions for the AD, and then there's one point that I'd like to discuss here with the working group, which is the following. So the status of the draft is currently proposed standard, and both Suresh and Brian asked whether we had considered having it not be a proposed standard, but something different, such as a BCP or an informational publication. And so what I answered in the email is to say, look, we have a document on which 6TISCH will build. So we'll define standards that will build on top of this. And on top of this, we are implementing this and doing interoperation with this. So as a result, proposed standards makes sense, and that's why we put proposed standard. Now we're very open to suggestions. And so, Brian, I think you have a suggestion for this.
Yeah, so this Brian Haberman, this question came up mainly because when you, or at least when I read the introduction to minimal, it's basically saying, until we can actually get better functionality going, this is how we think you should set it up. And to me, that sounds like something that this is currently the way we know how to do it, but we're going to, start doing it different ways as we develop new things. So it's not something you're going to say in 10 years, this is the way to do a minimal 6TISCH deployment.
It will remain though. It is we won't replace it by something better. We will build on top of it with something more advanced, in a sense.
Yeah.
So even if we define something better in the future, meaning some dynamic scheduling, it would still have it. One of the modes is to have the minimal running by default, and then on top of this, we go and schedule more cells.
Yeah. So to me, that says if you think you would advance it to internet standard, then proposed standard makes sense. But if this is what we think is the best way of doing it, that's a BCP. It still gets the same level of review and consideration, but it's more of a stick in the ground. This is how we do it now, and this is the best way we know how to do it now.
Yep.
As long as there's a well-informed discussion about that, I'm fine with you picking either way.
Okay.
But that's just the way I view those two different standards in relation to this document.
Great. Thank you for clarifying. We'll continue the discussion on mainlist.
I don't know. Tero Kivinen. I would actually say that I think it should be proposed standard, yes, but I think we should actually get rid of the, currently it says it's also used for interrupt testing. And I don't think that's something that we actually need to propose standard. So I would actually say that everything that is related to testing, move it to completely out from that document and say that it's the, the minimum running when we are building up the network and running the network in the minimal setup. There is no need to mention testing because I don't know, we can run the test setups in other documents that we now had for a previous Blackfest, we have a document saying that these are the keys and so on.
That sentence has been in there since the very first.
Yeah, I know, and I have copied it about a couple of times.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you for seeing this.
The more and more we think about minimal, the more and more we realize that it will be there for a very long time, because that's the baseline that all the devices will have, so you can do a minimum set of things with that, and you can rely on the fact that it's there. So.
Actually, one more comment. I realized just a little bit later when I was reading it through that we don't say anything about can the minimal setup change during the operation of the network. can somebody, because we don't say that, we say that we can enhanced beacons out, but nobody says there that we can't actually change, the slot frame number or number of slots or modify, because in 6TISCH network or TSCA networks,
Sure.
you can actually do that.
Sure.
So if we are going to be limiting it in the beginning, I think it might be better to say that when we create the network, we select the parameters and the parameters never change. And if you see any other parameters, you ignore them. That's actually going to solve some of the security problems also there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Tero.
Okay, we need that on the mailing list as well.
So I don't think I actually heard him use the term, but it's a profile, right? And if that's the case, you could simplify your life greatly. Suresh would be closer to correct when he said this is really an informational document, and that simplifies the publication process. Right? Because you're just documenting what everybody's already agreed to are the parameters that you're going to use in order to make this stuff work as the baseline.
Actually, again, now when you say it that way, actually, I think about, I don't think that actually in minimal there is actually not a single protocol element there, because we are using all the things that we are defining there is actually directly from 15.4.
Right.
And we are just saying, okay, you are using the 15.4 in this, using this, set of parameters. It's the most of the things we actually say there. So it actually should be actually just, profile, and then it actually could be informational, but it still could be, the set of, I don't know. Yeah.
Much clearer.
Forgive my stupidity on Thursday afternoon.
Night.
During a bring up of a bootstrapping of a network, are we not using minimal in order to get enough bandwidth to build our Ripple, to get the communications, to get the rest of the stuff that we need? So, I mean, that's really a lot more than informational to me. And that's why I'm just a little bit concerned. I think that outside of the IETF, it really probably doesn't matter, but that really doesn't sound right to me that's an informational document.
Michael, this was Michael Richardson.
Sorry, that was Michael Richardson.
Yeah, Robert Craigie. So this sounds to me like you're trying to do interoperability and implied certification kind of through the back door a bit, because you're talking about this is really a profile. You're then talking about test specifications. That works fine, but I don't know if it belongs in the IETF.
Back to Michael, one of the things actually we have there, we don't have even if you're using it building up the network, we are still using the stuff that is already defined in 15.4. There is nothing new in there in the protocol spec. We just specify that when we are sending this 15.4 frame, we are using, these parameters to send it out. So I don't think there's actually any protocol involved. I think it actually would be profile more, and that's actually why now when we are thinking more, I think it might be actually more better suited for informational profile type of thing. And actually I remember there was lots of comments, people saying that, okay, why are we copying so many stuff from 15.4? In your email, you were saying that this, that there is lots of things that we copy and we should limit the amount of copying. And that's actually a little bit, harder question, because I think the 15.4 documents are not very easy to understand. And so in some sense, the copying is actually, pointing people out what are the, things that you need to know from the 15.4.
Good. Thank you, Tero. We have to, I want to answer just, Robert, your remark. I didn't quite get it. We're just running code as we progress to see whether it works. I don't get your.
So the impression I got from Brian, Robert Craigie. So the impression I got from Brian was that things like test specifications are really not in scope for the IETF.
Absolutely.
And you're running plug tests, and you're trying to get interoperability and everything, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. But that a bunch of RFCs are not the right documents for what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and we're not thinking of turning these into RFCs. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, we have to move on. Thank you for the discussion. We'll continue on the mailing list to see what we're doing with it. So the next presenter will be remote. Chavivila Juzana, thank you for waking up.
After discussing with Brian, I have no further complaint about minimal going to BCP or informational.
Thank you, Michael.
That's Michael.
So let's switch to Xavi. I hope that the magic of Meet Echo will work and that you will appear in full screen. There we go.
Okay, do you hear me?
So tell me next slide and I'll switch.
Okay, so good morning, good afternoon.
Yes, perfectly.
Hello from Barcelona. I'm going to present the work we've been doing in the last weeks of the 6-stop sub layer. Next slide, please. So we published the latest version 2 days ago, and with a small refactoring and small changes with respect to the previous version, version 3. Next slide, please. So I have a long presentation with details on the draft, but I think that today is more important that we focus on some of the comments that Charlie raised on the mailing list. So I will skip some of the slides. Anyway, so the content of this draft is it introduces mainly two important things. One is the 6-stop operational sublayer and how it is organized, and the other one is the 6-stop protocol. And then as it introduces the use of a scheduling function, we provide some guidelines for it, but we do not say anything specific about this scheduling function, because we consider it something that is out of the scope for this document. Next slide, please. So for everybody to understand where we are 6-stop sublayer is in charge of managing the allocation of cells between two neighbors. So it provides functionalities to add, delete, relocate cells between two neighbor nodes. Next slide, please. And it sits on. Okay, sorry.
There's a 10-second delay, Xavi.
Okay.
On changing slides.
So you are in the 6-stop stack now? Okay, so basically 6-stop sits on top of 15.4e and provides two components. One is the 6-stop protocol, which I will describe now, and then it specifies or it declares the need for a scheduling function, which I think Diego or Maria Rita will present later. Next slide, please. Okay, so one of the points is the coexistence of 6-stop with the minimal draft configuration, and this is one of the questions that Charlie pointed out in the mailing list. So in this document, we recommend that in the case that we run minimal together with the 6-stop protocol, we use a slot frame with higher priority for minimal, and this is just a recommendation. We do not mandate that. And then answering also Charlie's question about what slots do we use when we bootstrap and the 6-stop sublayer starts allocating cells. So if we do not have any slot in the slot frame 1, as in this example, then we will use the minimal draft slots for that. Next slide, please. So this is just a simple example on how the 6-stop protocol works. Basically, a node sends a request to the neighbor, and in this case is an add, so requesting to add cells into the slot frame. And it specifies the number of cells to be added. Then we have this abstraction we call container, and container is something that we define in a generic way at the 6-stop protocol, and then the policy, the scheduling function, can decide its meaning. And the meaning can be the slot frame, and in this case, it would point to a slot frame with ID 1, or it can point to a track ID, a chunk ID, wherever the scheduling function wants to allocate. And then we send the cell list, and this is a candidate cell list for node A, and then node B will get this candidate list and select from its schedule the cells that can be used. And in the response, it will respond with a response code, either success, error, or there are several different options, and with the finally allocated cells. So this is what the 6-stop protocol does. And next slide, please. And we defined next slide, please, Thomas. Okay, thank you. So we define a general message format which uses the information elements abstraction as defined in 1540. And in this case, we thought to request a group ID for IETF and then use sub IEs for our messages. I think this is something that we need still to discuss, and maybe Charlie later provides us with an update. But basically, if we have this space, then we will define sub IE with the following format, having a version, a code, which is the command or the response code, then a scheduling function ID in case of the receiving node or the nodes implement more than one, and then other fields. Next slide. So these are the list of commands that we defined. It's add, delete, count, list, clear. And then the response codes that we already defined in the draft. Again, this is still open, and we have to finalize this work by analyzing all the possible requirements for this protocol. But I think that we cover most of the functionalities. So next slide, please. So to encode a cell, when we request a cell, we use 4 bytes, 2 bytes for the slot offset and 2 bytes for the channel offset. This in the mailing list. The question was if 2 bytes is not too much. We understand that maybe with 1 byte is enough, but if we restrict this to 1 byte, then maybe we cannot support future evolutions of the physical layer or of the MAC layer in case of we implement this on top of narrow band channels, or we have different ways of allocating or managing cells in the lower layer. Next slide, please. These are again the message formats for the request messages, and the add and delete specify the cell list, while the count, list, and clear have different elements. Next slide. Well, so this is just indicating that we can have different fields after when in a response message. So again, next slide, please. Okay, so in the protocol we define this behavior. So it's a version checking. Each packet comes with a version, and then we will verify that it's compliant in both nodes and that they can talk. We have a scheduling function ID. Then we enable concurrent six-stop protocol transactions, meaning that if 2 nodes can be negotiating with another one, and we support these allocations. We specify timeouts in the sense that if we request from a node to another one and then we lose the response, then we will time out the allocation and retry later. We can abort, we can delete cells, etc. So these are the main functionalities that we define. Next slide. Okay.
Javi, there's a question at the mic.
Yes, Pascal Tubert. Xavi, I'm sorry, you couldn't see me, but I was at the mic, and I wanted
Okay.
a clarifying question, but it was in the
Yes.
previous slide. Do you mind going back one slide? One more. I mean, the one with the drawing with the blue. Oh, it's many more slides. Where is it? The one? No, we've passed it. You know
It's the
the
next
one with
one,
the
I
blue
think.
interaction, the flow in there, nice flow. Good. Yes, it's after that. Where is it? Yes.
So we're this one?
Oh,
Didn't get there
okay.
yet.
So it's linked to the one with the flow. Yes, because we already had this flow somehow earlier. You basically say node A requests to node B the allocation of a number of cells and provides a list of cells. Now in the architecture, what we have is the cells are owned by the REPL parent, and the REPL parent is the one which will decide this set of cells, whether the flow is from the parent to the child or from the child to the parent, right? So what if it's the child that needs the slots for its transmission? It only knows because he has pressure in its queues. How does it go to the parent and say, start this flow? You see what I mean? The flow, the way you describe it, has to start from the owner of the cells, which is
No,
always
it's
the
not
parent.
always the parent, it's the children, right? So the node C requests to node A to allocate cells.
Well, you can request to allocate cells, but the chunk of cells, the pool of cells from which the cells are taken belong to the parent. With the architecture, we decided long ago that the parent appropriates a chunk of cells, which is the pool of cells which are used in both directions between this parent and its children.
Yeah, but then so you mean
you would probably need a small addition in what you describe here, so that if it's the child that needs the allocation, then the child goes and asks the parent, please add some cells, this number of cells, but I'm not proposing anything. And now the parent comes back with the proposal, and the child selects a number of them.
yeah, but this will only
See what I'm
have an
saying?
implication on the container ID. Maybe the child shouldn't specify the container ID.
Neither the container nor the cell numbers, right? Just says, I need 5 more cells, please. And then you can start your flow from the parent, as you described that.
I propose that we take this as a discussion to. So I don't think it changes the format of the packet, but it changes the way we used container ID and cell list. In this case, it would be container ID. Cell list would be empty. Let's ask.
Okay, so next slide, please. So then the document defines the guidelines for the scheduling function, and it proposes a recommended structure for a specification of a scheduling function. We also define a range of scheduling function identifiers, having most of them managed and only leaving few of them to be unmanaged. And this was something that we raised in a previous work group call. Next slide, please. So this is one of the next steps. We need some kind of agreement with IEEE, and I think that this already started to get this group ID for IETF, and then us internally to define these sub IDs for our commands. Next slide. Yes.
So can I clarify something, Charlie? So the idea, and I'm looking at Charlie. The idea is to have a group ID for the IETF, and then have the IETF manage the format of those elements, which would be formatted like the MLME with sub IDs. So the sub IDs would be managed by the IETF through IANA, and the group ID would be allocated by the IEEE to the IETF. That would be the idea.
Okay.
One sec.
This is Charlie Perkins. I really don't have a comment on that, and since all this with the LLC is so new, but I mean, clearly there's going to be other needs for very similar definitions as what you would get for the information elements that you request, and then we will be in a situation where other groups might want to use the same information elements that you've already defined and so on. So I think this is a matter for discussion.
Okay, thank you.
There's also the 59, has a multiplexing layer where you can actually get what's easier to get the numbers, because the group IDs, there is 16 out of them, so it's a very short, very limited amount. And so it's not something that there's already vendor specific, so you can actually use that if you want to, but I mean, that's one of the options. In 59, we have a, bigger 16-bit field that the first, 64 is going to be optimized or easy to use, faster to use. And getting those numbers is much easier, should be. And 59 is now past the sponsor ballot. It's going to be out, I don't know, next year.
So we have an interest group for 6TISCH at the IEEE, and right now we mostly care about the semantics of those bits that we want to have on the wire, but we don't really care the way they're formatted. So would it be possible to get some help actually from the IEEE, maybe through the interest group, to just come back to us with use this format so we have a better chance to be reused in the future to address Charlie's problems? And if you could help us and propose like some bit formats, then yes, why not? I mean, that would be very helpful. Xavier, I have another question for you, clarification question. So I'm a child in this Ripple network, and I want to allocate 5 cells going up and 3 cells going down. Do I need to do 2 adds?
So if you want, to go up, the child will decide. To go down, the parent will decide.
Okay.
Okay, next slide. I think it's the last one. Next slide. So these are important issues raised by Charlie. Qing-Wan also answered most of them, but I want to maybe go through them a little bit and see if we can have some feedback on this. So the first one is that Charlie raised the need for non-local statistics. By now, 6TOP proposes to get basic statistics in a per node base, but it seems reasonable to think about these flow statistics. So this is something that we should think about. Then the other point number 2 is where the 6TOP commands are sent, and these already I raised that also when we talk about minimal. So if we have a slot frame for 6TOP to work on, and we have minimal, what cells are used to send these commands? As a first thought, I think that we can use minimal slots first, and as long as we get more bandwidth on the slot frame for 6TOP, then we can use the dedicated cells for that as well. But this is just thought. It's something that we should specify. Number 3 is the retry policy, and So by now it's open to the scheduling function how retries are managed, but this can also have some problems, as pointed out by Charlie, and because we can have random backoffs, and if we have different policies with random backoff, we have some contention problems. So should the scheduling function provide some recommendations about that? So the 4th point, I think it's already raised, and I think maybe later we have more information. Number 5 is the 2-byte frequency offset and slot offset. And again, I also pointed that out. We do not want to restrict to 15.4 as it is now, and maybe in the future we have different number of channels that we can use. So why not? The container, this is important concept because it's something that we define in a generic way, and we want the scheduling function to use it as desired. And this can be by identifying chunks, tracks, slot frames, etc. So we let it open. This point number 7 is the role of the scheduling function at boot. So should we describe an initial behavior when the scheduling function boots? For example, allocating some initial bandwidth to allocate or to work on, etc. And also the role of the scheduling function with respect to monitoring and actuation. So we need to be more clear on this aspect. Yeah, so these are, yeah, go Thomas.
So we're a little bit over time. Charlie, please go ahead. Let's try and conclude quickly.
So this is Charlie Perkins again. I just would, on the particular thing about the retry policy, well, the reason why I brought it up is because we had drafts that were, we wanted to have even some sort of adjustable retry policy, and that was rejected because at that time anyway, the policy seemed to be, it's either binary exponential back off or it's not good. So, but the thing is, you really can't figure that out by interop testing. It's a scalability thing. And so I don't exactly understand why it has to be left variable in this case unless you really are confident that you'll never encounter this kind of scalability problem.
So can I try answering? So I didn't hear the sentence where we said that interrupt test would validate everything.
No, I didn't. Okay, I should.
But
right.
the idea is that there are several use cases. In some cases, this binary backoff might work. In other cases, something different might work. And the idea is that to make this flexible, we push it to the scheduling function because there can be multiple, rather than keeping it inside the core, in which case it has to be one fits all. That's the idea.
Okay, well, that's a reasonable answer. And regarding the SF function at boot, maybe I didn't fully understand, but I thought actually the SF functions were actually somehow dependent upon the application that was running, and the applications may not be running at boot time. They might be brought in as needed. So I don't understand why you want to, unless there's something about the service functions that is not tied to application. But
so I think this was a point in your email in the mailing list. Maybe we did not understand it as you thought.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I suggest we continue on the mailing list.
Okay,
and that's it, I think.
Okay, thank you very much, Xavi, for presenting. Thanks for waking up. The next presenter is also remote, so because of last-minute visa issues, Margarita could not be here physically, but she accepted to present from Luxembourg. So thank you, Margarita, for agreeing nonetheless to present. Your full screen. Just tell me when you want me to switch slides. Okay. There's about a 3-4 second delay.
So good afternoon. I will present this new draft, but it is important to specify this is not a completely new work. You can pass to the next slide, please. So we have been working on the scheduling function 0 for fulfilling the new need of the six-step sublayer. But as I said, this is not a completely new job because actually we were already working on the fly scheduling for building a distributed in a distributed fashion a schedule within the network. So this is just for summarizing where this draft comes from. So we have a version 0, but actually we had already 6 version on OTF. So we have still some work to do for completing the draft, but I will highlight this at the end. Next slide, please. So as I said, this scheduling function aim to define some rule for adding and deleting a cell. And we have identified a procedure that can be articulated in 3 steps. The first one is about monitoring, because of course we need to monitor the traffic condition and check in order to be able to decide the amount of bandwidth that we need. So after the monitor, there is a need to estimate the bandwidth that each node needs, and then the last step is to compare this bandwidth that is needed with the number of cells that have been already scheduled in order to decide if there is a need to add or delete cell. And this is done according to an allocation policy. Next slide, please. So in terms of monitoring, we will have a look to the traffic that is locally generated by the node, and this is what we call local node bandwidth requirement, but we will have to look at also at the traffic that is incoming, for example, from the child node. And then based on this traffic condition, we will be able to estimate what is the needed bandwidth. And then this will be an input to provide to the allocation policy. Next slide, please. And then the role of the allocation policy will be to compare the number of already scheduled cell with the required cell based on a threshold. This threshold somehow represents a number of over-provisioning cell that will allow to avoid very frequent negotiation for adding and or deleting cell. So based on the value of these 3 parameters, we will have cases in which we need to add more cell or to delete, or cases in which we are already good and we have an enough number of cells scheduled. Next slide, please. How this action will take really place. So we have defined a kind of transaction, which is a negotiation between a source and a destination node. So as Xavi already explained before, the source node will provide a list of potential of candidate cell, and then the destination node will have to pick some of these that are also available on its side. And in detail, the source node will just pick, for each cell, will pick a random slot offset and then verify if it is free. And in this case, we'll just randomly select a channel offset. And this will be repeated for the number of cells that are needed. And then on the destination side, the node will look in this list, and for each cell will also verify if the slot offset is free. In that case, the cell will be allocated. Otherwise, it will keep in checking the other cell in the list. So from our point of view, this is a kind of very simple negotiation phase, but it will be good to have some feedback from the group if there are other ways that can be even simpler and can make this phase efficient and fast. Next slide, please. We have been also defining the behavior of the node at the boot, and we have defined a clear command. So with this command, the source node can ask to the destination to delete all the cells that were previously allocated. And this can be useful, as we will see afterward, in case of some error that may occur during the negotiation. And then one further option that the scheduling function has is about relocation. In fact, some cell is wished, and then there is the possibility to reallocate. That means just to move the cell. And this can be done based on some PDR statistic, and we may have two different options. We may shift the cell either in on time or in frequency, and then meaning we change only the slot offset or only the channel offset, or we may change both. And there is a lot to discuss within the group, because we will have to decide how we compute this statistic. And I think already there was a preliminary discussion. We don't have to consider maybe only the local statistic, but the per flow one. And then we may decide, okay, we leave this out of scope to be defined somewhere else, or we at least provide an example or a minimal way of doing it, or we may need to define some technique for deciding how we change the slot offset and the channel offset. So if we do in a random way, or if we do with some minimal role. And then when we reallocate, of course, we will do this when we see that the performance are below an average that we have fixed a priori. Next slide, please. Okay, so Xavi before was referring to some return code that the six-stop protocol can provide during this negotiation phase. So when a node will ask for some cell to be added or deleted, of course we will have the successful scenario when the source node will ask to the destination node for a number of cells and will provide a list, and the destination node will be able to find in this list the number of requested cells. So in this case, no problem, everything will go fine. But it may happen that inside the list there isn't enough number of cell requests, and so in this case, this is a kind of error that need to be managed, and then we may consider a different option. So one option is that the source node will provide a completely different cell list, and this implies that need to have some memory for keeping information about the cell that were in conflict, the one that the destination node was already using or anyway couldn't allocate. And then the other option is easier to just provide a new random cell list, but of course, in this case, we can have a probability that we pick again the same cell. So here still there is a lot to discuss, because we have to provide some at least guideline for deciding how this new list will be built. And of course, this may depend by different conditions, like the memory that is available, and maybe also depend on the application. Next slide, please. Yes, sure.
Margarita, can I, because you can't see
Sure.
and raise, but can I ask a clarifying question? So this work initially, and since, for a long time, but until recently, expected a co-op, i.e. at the six-stop layer. And so that was kind of not a transactional, but at least a continuation of process. So yet you could know that this request from what we used to call OTF all the way down to the next device and back could be identified by a sequence number, an acknowledgement number, those things. And what I'm seeing, I seem to see this gone, the fact that we can correlate what you're doing in DSF with the activity over the wire and back. So, and I think I'm missing that. I think we should be able to track the request that you're making here from SF down to 6-stop, and then from 6-stop on the left to 6-stop on the right and back with kind of a sequence number or an acknowledgement number. So we can know that this transaction is complete or not complete, and that's this particular request that is going through and coming back. You see? As opposed to just send something and hope something happens, and if you don't, if it doesn't happen because something was lost, you send something else and then you get a response, and you're not too sure which response is responding to what. So my suggestion here is to work with the 6-stop and sequence number or identifiers to every
yes,
request
I
so we
think
can
we
track
will
them.
take this point because it is important, and I don't know if Thomas wants to add anything.
Yeah, it's just, so we ruled out, how did we say this? No, not that. We ruled out the concurrent communication, so you cannot start a new request as long as you haven't received a response of the previous one with a timeout, of course. So, but yeah.
But we don't have any retry policy. We don't have sequence numbers, so we don't really know where we stand and what was missed. So I'm not sure we're.
Okay, well, I propose that we take this on the.
So considering other possible error that may occur, it may happen, for example, that a node doesn't support the version of the 6-stop sublayer of the scheduling function that the other is using. And so in this case, there are different possibilities. For example, the node can try again, or it can just put this neighbor in a blacklist, or may try later to contact again the same node. And then, as I said before, it may happen that there is a need to reset, and in this case, we define a timeout after which the node will just start the scheduling process again. And another case can be when the node is busy because it is dealing another negotiation, and in this case we will just reset, and then of course the request will be done later. Next slide, please. So this is something that, of course, will be done in parallel also with the same request from the 6th sublayer. So we will need an identifier for the scheduling function, and so we will have to deal this with IANA. We will ask for an ID. Next slide, please. And as I said, of course, this is just a preliminary version. We have to still complete different parts. So one point is about the container field inside the 6-stop request. So this container field, we will need to specify what it means for us. And one option is to specify it like a chunk. So in this case, the list of cells will be taken inside the chunk that is held by the parent node. And then we will, in the next version of the draft, also provide some example about the error handling. We have to still define some security consideration. And because a new version, actually on Monday, there was a version 4 of the 6th layer was published, we will have to align with it and finally fix some typos. But the most important point is to keep in discussing about the draft and this contact on the mailing list for converging to something solid and complete. So that's all on my side.
Any questions for Margarita? So I see nobody. You want? So there's no questions, Margarita. Crystal clear. Thank you very much. Thank you. So one quick point on the minutes. There's somebody writing in dark blue. Can you put your name, please, in the upper right-hand corner so we can see who writes what? So we're switching back to Japan. The next item is about tracks, and so Pascal will present the 4.NET draft of 6TISCH.
Okay, so the reason why we have this draft is that new work is taking place in groups which are .NET and PCE, which could be helpful for 6TISCH provided that we tell those groups what it is 6TISCH would need in the future to enable forwarding along the tracks. So that means that this concept of a track that we've had in the architecture forever should now be clarified and specified to a point that it's actually a concept that can be used by the other groups, which could provide us some help in delivering the services. The problem of tracks is a generic problem of GMPLS. It's much wider than just the scope of 6TISCH. So it makes a lot of sense to look at work which is happening at .NET, at TEAS, to specify topologies and install TE path, which really those tracks would end up being. So the goal of this document is mostly to expose our thoughts, our concepts to .NET and PCE and have them include that in their thought process. To make that happen, we need to be very clear and very specific about what we think a track is, how we think it's going to operate, what kind of services it will bring. And now we can expose that to .NET and try to have that included in the data models and the protocols that they will be defining there. So the goal of this draft is actually to obtain this consensus of what tracks are and how they are operated within 6TISCH. And as it goes, a lot of the track operation is described from a high level in the 6TISCH architecture. So most of that text actually repeated in this 4.NET draft. There's one thing which was not really discussed, and that is in scope for .NET. So really, I wanted to expose that to you guys and get feedback. It's what .NET calls packet replication and elimination, PRE. There are a number of protocols in the industry, packet redundancy protocol, PRP, HSR, which exist, which are defined as IEC protocols now, which explain how you can have a packet over two non-congruent paths, sequence and then eliminated when they are received on the other side. Meaning that if you have one path which has a 10-5 reliability and the other path also has a 10-5 reliability, then you get a 10-10 reliability if you use the two paths concurrently, meaning that also you have to send two packets and spend the energy for the two packets. So whether this is something we want to do at 6TISCH, whether it's something we want to incorporate in our topological model, that's really a question for this group, which was not yet discussed in the architecture. So that's why there is specific text which is new to this group in this particular draft, and that's why I'm attracting your attention on this text. So what we are used to is ARQ. That's the basic retry. So the basic retry works like this. You've got one time slot between A and B. Actually, it's moved a little bit, but this time slot here, which enable these guys to send a packet to this guy. And then a little bit later, you've got another time slot, which allows this guy to send a packet to this guy. A little bit later, you've got another time slot, which also enables this guy to send a packet to this guy. It's the same packet. It's two opportunities for sending. If the first send works, then I don't need to use the second time slot and both nodes can be sleeping. So the logical operation between the two is an OR. This works or this works. And I'm doubling my chances to actually get the packets through from this node to this node. And after that, this node can keep forwarding. So this node will see two incoming slots, which are ORed, and one outgoing slot or multiple outgoing slot. So there is a logical operation here that we need to describe to .NET in our topological model, which we say is two slots in, one slot out. The second type of operation, and this one is really new to 6TISCH, is the replication. And in this case, you get one time slot in from this guy to this guy, But this guy has 2 time slot out, and it's an AND operation. Even if this one succeeds, you still have to do this one because the packet will follow one path and it will follow another path. Right? So that's a new type of operation that we have to define and get programmed by the PCE. And the third one is the opposite of that one. That's the elimination. I'm actually getting the same packet twice on 2 different time slots. And they have to realize in this node that whether it's received here or here, and it's actually from different peers, it's the same packet. I have to keep the first copy I got, and that's the one I'm going to send out. Okay, so the new discussion, the thing which is really new in this draft is to discuss those models and validate with the group that they are of interest for the operation of a truck. So my ask to the group is really to look at this document, review it, agree whether it makes sense, discuss it, because that's a thing that we are exposing to the outside of this working group. That's something that we are actually showing to DetNet and asking them to consider for the services that they will provide. So it's important for the visibility that we give to the outside that we agree on what's in this document. Another outcome of this work is we have a lot of text on trucks in the architecture. And the question to the group is, and I think the answer is yes, so as a group member I would say yes, should we actually make a document that explains trucks specifically, so make the architecture a little bit leaner and export some of the text about trucks from the architecture, which is a bit too big at the moment, and into a document which would be specific on trucks. And I really would like to get some feedback today from this room about the opportunity to create this document about trucks, which would be like an extension to the architecture document, but with more information about trucks. And then there is all this discussion of IP and non-IP traffic that Chonggang has started, and I would like to see this discussed as well in the context of this track document, as opposed to something we actually charter to commit to do. And that's it for me. Any comments? Anybody read the document? Yeah, so I have a ask for this group here. This is really important for what we show to the rest of the IETF, that you look at this draft. The track operation is quite critical for 6TISCH, for our future. So please read this document and go to the mailing list and give feedback. The document was actually already incorporated in a DetNet document that will become soon workgroup document. There will be this text, and it's supposed to represent what this group thinks. So it's really important that if you have a disagreement in this text, you speak up as soon as possible. And with this, thank you.
Thank you, Pascal. Okay, so we're moving on to the any other business part, and the first other business is the presentation by Miguel Angel on the second 6TISCH plug test.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Miguel Angel Reina from ETSI. So this presentation will be just to announce officially the second plug test for 6TISCH. So next slide, please. Okay, so first of all, I would like just to remind the successful story of the first 6TISCH plug test that we had during the previous IETF meeting in Prague from 17th to 19th July, where the scope of the event was to test interoperability of the different 6TISCH implementations based on the minimal draft. So that was quite successful, but we don't want to stop there. We want to continue progressing on this. So we have planned the second 6TISCH plug test to be run from 2nd to 4th February 2016. It will be hosted by INRIA, so it will be in Paris, France. And the idea here will be to have a continuation of the first 6TISCH plug test And I put here XX in the scope that we will be based on XX specification because we are open to any suggestion. We would like to continue on addressing the minimal, and from the first discussion we have had, probably we will address a 6-stop protocol, but we are open to any suggestions. You want to address any other thing, we could talk about security or maybe the 6 law over age that we have been discussing in the 6 law meeting this morning. So we are open. So here are some aspects about the technical organization. So we have formed a group of experts that it is same group of experts that we had for the first 6TISCH plaque test. So we have Maria Rita Palatella, Xavier Villa-Hosana, Tenfei Chan, and Thomas Wayden. So they will be in charge of developing the test specifications for the second 6TISCH. These test specifications will be based on the first test specifications that we developed for the first 6TISCH. So they will be updated. So then we will, or they will be in charge as well to produce a technical report that we will have to send to the European Commission. I will remind again that these events are sponsored by the European Commission. And okay, they will do also technical support during the plaque tests. So here a bit of the work planning. Maybe the most important milestone will be the first one that it will be mid-December before the Christmas holidays. And we plan to deliver the first draft of the updated test specifications by that date. We have seen from the previous plaque test that it is very important to distribute in advance, quite in advance, the test specifications. In fact, we discover most of the issues prior to the plaque test. So we target this date before Christmas for the first updated test specifications. Then second stable draft will be for the mid-January, a couple of weeks before the event. Finally, the final draft will be just delivered right before the plaque test, or even the day of the plaque test starts. And we will be running the milestone 4 is the plaque test itself. And then, sorry, there is a mistake here. So milestone 5 will be the technical report of the second plaque test that will be end of February, not end of August. So now the website for the second 6TISCH, here it is written that has been launched, but it's not true. At the time when I was preparing the slides, I thought that it was going to be launched, but it will be very, very soon, maybe today afternoon or tomorrow or early next week, but it will be very, very soon launched. It is already ready, so just need to launch it. In this website, we will find some general information about the event, logistic information as well, and as well the registration link to register to the event. The registration, of course, is again open. It's free of charge, and it will close 15th of January 2016. Then next steps for 6TISCH. So we are already planning, having in mind the third 6TISCH plaque test. It will be probably during the IETF 96 meeting in Germany. And what will be the scope? So again, we are open. Here are some ideas: security, backbone, dynamic scheduling, 6 law or age, wherever. So we are open. And I think that's it from my side. I don't know if you have any questions.
I see no question. Thank you very much for presenting, and thank you very much for helping us organize these events. It's as you can as you can see from these discussions, it's a very good excuse to get work, to advance work really fast. We've had a very successful event, 15 companies in Prague. We hope to have more this time. Thank you. The last any other business declared so far is a presentation, an introduction by Charlie of some activity at the IEEE, which involves work worked on here.
Hello, my name's Charlie Perkins, and I've been involved for last year or a little bit more with 802.15, and recently joined the interest group on the formation of a group to actually do LLC, or logical link control, for 802.15.4. Now we had our first, the interest group did vote to form a study group, and the study group was formed and we had our first meeting just a few weeks ago in September. So then after that, it was pretty clear that we should come to IETF and bring this up with the IETF IEEE Coordination Committee, and so that's why I'm here, and I'm glad to have some time on the agenda to talk with you about this. So we have a timeline, which I'll talk about in just a few minutes, but basically the idea is to take what the specification for 802.15.4 and try to find a way to provide necessary functions that can be used with 15.4, but don't have at least not a strong dependence upon the particular Mac or file layers that are actually in use. And the hope is that in that way, that'll make 802.15.4 much easier to use than it has been. And so I'll say something about that. But the situation now is that there's actually, since 802.15.4 is pretty minimal in some ways about some of the functions that are not, I mean, it's a lot of functions are not specified. They're left for the higher layer protocols to do. But that's led to a situation where people develop proprietary solutions, and it could be better. Plus, in 802.15, there's several related efforts. One is KMP for key management protocol, and L2R layer 2 routing. So let's see here. This, by the way, I acknowledge Pascal drew this for me because he knows PowerPoint better than I do. And so what it shows pretty much where things fit. We have Mac layer down here, file layers below that. And there's actually quite a number of those. I don't know how many, but well, it's enough to be confusing. And then on top of the LLC, there's various higher level protocols, even non-IP protocols, but what YSUN. So there's ZigBee, best effort, deterministic, and 6TISCH is actually, let me just say about 6TISCH. In 802.15, there's been an interest group for 6TISCH, IG6T, and they're every meeting there's a report on what has been happening in 6TISCH. So I think it's fair to say that 802.15 in general is taking a strong interest in 6TISCH in particular, and DetNet I think has had something to do with that as well. So oops. So the intention is to find a way to have an LLC that satisfies the needs of the customers, and it's obvious that we have there's a demand for this because a lot of different solutions have been developed. I think that 6TISCH has to be considered one of the major customers. And so what else can I say about this? Well, so what we did do in the September meeting, in our first study group meeting, was we developed a proposal for the PAR and CSD, which in the interest of time, I have not included here, but shortly I'll show you a link to where you can look at more complete information. So these are the things that rose to the top of the list. And one is that there's going to be, there's a need for something resembling an ether type for 802.15.4. So there's a dispatch mechanism to pick out the appropriate protocol. And then we have our efforts in 802.15 for KMP and layer 2 routing. So we'd like to provide, you might say, LLC access to those important functions. And we also want to have this LLC provide for future extensibility. One of the important things that is covered, should be enabled by this, is regulatory things. So we want to have a way to enable operation by calling the appropriate function in LLC that will establish the right parameters for the country of operation. And then I've already mentioned about the customer base of 6TISCH, for instance. One thing, let's see. Yeah, it's not in here, but I think clearly part of the function that we're going to provide is, for instance, adaptation layers for IPv4 and v6. And my last slide here is the timeline and some links. This is probably too small for you to read, but if you go there, you'll see a bigger presentation that actually I appended this to the end of that. So there would be, this is our document repository for all the, for all the 15, 802.15 documents, but this field here says it's for LLC. And so you can get more PowerPoint slides with more full information. And then if you want to look at more things from LLC, you can find all of them by going to this this URL. And then there's a menu item for which group you want to see. So if you go to LLC, you'll see there's about 7 or 8 of them there to take a look at. Again, this is a brand new effort. So I'm going to take back for our meeting in Dallas next week. I've had a lot of feedback already from the IEEE IETF Coordination Committee. And so that'll be a subject of major discussion. And so that'll happen next week. Then we have an interim meeting, and about this time, if things go well, then we would have this PAR as a request for a new project. And so we have to have the PAR ready 30 days in advance of the next executive committee meeting, which is in March. So hopefully by this time we'll have the project request done. And this is, I forgot the acronym, but it basically means these are the criteria to make it a realistic project. And pardon? Criteria for standards development. Yeah, thank you. I needed that. But it's it's actually a fairly sensible checklist to make sure that there's customers, make sure it's technically feasible, make sure it's economically feasible, and so on. So you're welcome to take a look at our proposed answers for those questions. And again, next week we'll probably refine all of that. So this is a pretty good timeline, and if we manage to get approval in March, then we'll start rolling, and then in a couple of years have something that can withstand all the. Well, going through the process of comment resolution in IEEE is quite an experience. You can have 1,000 comments, and you just have to go through every one of them. So that's what we do, and. So what I wanted to say about this, though, is obviously 6TISCH being A, major customer, and B, already well in progress, I think that we need to be coordinating even before March, and certainly we're not going to wait around till 2017. So exactly how this would be accomplished is a matter I'd like to have some discussion from the people here in this room, and I will definitely take all the ideas back for discussion next week. Thank you very much. Pascal?
Charlie, clarifying question. I've seen the number 802.1512 associated with the LLC.
Well,
and I have two questions, right?
Okay.
I mean, what does that mean to have a number which is not a .4 something? And what does that mean in particular in terms of document? Like, I'm used to see things like 15.4e being rolled back into the next generation of 15.4. Does the 12 mean that the 12 documents will live in parallel to the 15.4 documents, or will that be incorporated in some future? That's the kind of history that these 12s.
Well, actually, .12 was used as a way for us to have this mental picture of what it was going to be. Bob, do you want to say something about this? Bob, let me introduce Bob Hiley. He is the...
Bob Hiley, I'm chair of 802.15. The reason it's being listed as .12 is we actually do want an independent standard. 15.4 is complex enough as it is. This is really, the LLC is a nice, carvable, separate, standardizable piece. It's intended to play with 15.4, only with 15.4, but then it doesn't get caught up in 15.4 revisions and all that kind of stuff. So it's...
Any more feedback that I can take back to the meeting in Dallas?
Well, you know, you have already a number of questions from us, like there was this question of the bits that we asked for an IE, and we asked you how we can ask for an IE, actually, what's the formal process that we can ask. But in parallel, if you guys can come up to us and say, it would be nice if you don't use this IE, but use this particular format for what we want to do with the 6-stop, so that later it's easier for you guys to take over this work at some point. Well, please come back to us and say, the bits and bytes should be this. And that's something that you could consider discussing. I know it's ahead of time for your work, but if you have any idea, I see Tero talking about 59 and what else. Well, we can always appreciate advice on that.
Yeah, so this is Thomas. In terms of development, I think excited that this is happening at the IEEE. Interesting work. But we're going to continue working on the 6-stop protocol, with our current really fast pace. And then I think the discussions and the group at the IEEE will then continue the discussions in parallel of how we can coordinate better. But I think we started really well coordinating well in this meeting.
Right. If you can tell them, right, that, well, we've got our plans rolling, and we really depend for the whole stack that we are defining on this work being done in 6-stop rapidly, because the rest builds on it. So certainly the first generation of what we'll produce will be an RFC from this group, which will say 6-stop works this way. Another question will be how we converge over time. But for the very short term, this group has to continue working, and it has to deliver this RFC on which we built the dynamic scheduling. Right?
Well, I first of all agree with you, and second of all, I think it's pretty clear that both groups want more or less the same thing. I mean, there's no conflict in the goals here. The only additional consideration in IEEE is there's other customers as well, and so, but I can't imagine, for instance, that the other customers would not need some of the functionality that's already been specified in 6-top. So I think that this is a natural sort of fit. Now, I can't speak for the LLC group, and so I hesitate to make too many suggestions, but what I think we ought to do is to actually participate on the 6TISCH mailing list and try to come up with something that really fits the needs. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Charlie. So this was already pretty long any other business section, which usually takes 33 seconds. Any other business? Other business? Okay, if there's nothing, we're a small miracle. We're 10 minutes early. Thank you so much. Please sign the blue sheets.